A to Z Mysteries, The New Year Dragon Dilemma, Super Edition 5, by Ron Roy. Chapter 4. Dink laughed, but he put his hands over his ears. The fireworks were loud, but all the screaming and clapping were even louder. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose were squeezed together next to Holden. They were in the front of the crowd. "Here comes the dragon," Ruth Rose said. Gumlung came toward them. The 100 men and women underneath were doing fancy steps, making the dragon appear to be dancing. The carriers made it slither and wriggle like a snake. Music blared from speakers. "This is awesome!" Josh shouted into Dink's ear. "We need to get one of these dragons for Green Lawn." Dink smiled, thinking about the little parades he'd seen back home in Connecticut. The dragon they were watching here would hardly even fit on their main street. As the dragon passed by, one of the carriers stepped out from under its belly. He ran to the front of the dragon and stuck his whole head in its mouth. Everyone laughed and cheered as the man pulled his head out and ran back to his place under the dragon. "They do that every year to prove the dragon is happy," Holden explained. "If the dragon was angry, he'd bite the guy's head off." A second person with red legs ran up and put his head in the dragon's mouth, then jogged back to his position underneath. He waved to the cheering crowd. "You want to try that, Josh?" Dink asked. "No way," Josh said. "The dragon looks hungry." The crowd laughed as a third person came out from underneath the dragon. He or she was short, with a dragon mask on. But instead of running up to the dragon's head, this person ran toward the back of the dragon. A few other people noticed too and started pointing and laughing. "Bet he's heading for the porta-potty," someone behind Dink joked. The figure disappeared in the darkness behind the dragon's tail. The dragon passed. Then the crowd burst into cheers and applause again. "It's the Miss Chinatown float," Ruth Rose cried. Dink felt Josh and Ruth Rose move closer to him. His belly was up against the fence. The swan float crept slowly forward, only a few feet at a time. Dink knew that a truck was pulling the float, but the truck's cab had also been covered in blossoms. A small hole allowed the driver to see the road. "There she is!" someone yelled. Miss Chinatown, dressed in a gold silk robe, stood behind the swan's head. Dink recognized the fancy clothing he'd seen on the flyer. A black sash was wrapped around the girl's waist. A silk purse hung over her shoulder. She was wearing a white mask with her hair tucked under a gold crown. In the center of the crown, gleaming under the lights, was a ruby the size of Dink's fist. Miss Chinatown held on to a golden rope that came from the swan's mouth, like a horse's reins. She waved her other hand at the people. Dink wondered if the girl wearing the mask was Lily. He turned to say something to Holden, but the person behind Dink was a woman holding the hands of her 2 children. Holden was nowhere to be seen. Miss Chinatown reached into her silk bag and pulled out a handful of wrapped candies. She tossed them into the crowd. Everyone tried to catch some. "More, more," the crowd cried. She threw handful after handful of candies toward the cheering people. "She looks so beautiful," Ruth Rose shouted above the noise. "I hope it's Lily." "Me too," Dink said. "Have you seen Holden?" "Wasn't he right behind us?" Josh asked. "I thought he was," Dink said, "but now he's gone." The kids turned to check the people behind them. There were several tall men with black hair, but none was Holden. Suddenly, the festivities were interrupted with more loud bangs. "More fireworks," Josh yelled. "Cool." Everyone looked at the sky, where thousands of tiny purple lights cascaded down toward the ground. A few more fireworks exploded, and then the spectacle stopped. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose looked back at the swan float as it slowly moved past them. "Hey, where's the candy lady?" one of the kids behind Dink called out. "Where is she?" asked Ruth Rose. "Where's Miss Chinatown?" No one was standing behind the swan's head tossing candy. Miss Chinatown had disappeared.